Thank you for joining us, and the floor is yours.
Fantastic and nice virtual background there, James. I think you've won with the backgrounds here. Thank you, James. Thank you to my man, Wade, to all of our friends in Southwestern Wisconsin. It's great to be with you. Shout out to Christina and Josephine and the whole James family. As many of you know, my name is Stephen Olikara, and I'm running for the U.S. Senate. And my mission, our mission in the Senate, will be to fundamentally change the political system so we can rebuild dignity in our politics. And that conviction comes from an unconventional background. Growing up as the son of Indian immigrants in Waukesha County, where I was an outsider, not a lot of people looked like me. From my background as a musician, playing every genre of music in bands, as a guitarist and as a drummer, where I learned about the power of listening, the power of helping people see their common humanity. And inspired from that work, I got involved with Obama's campaign, got to introduce him in front of a rally in front of 30,000 people. That changed my life. And from there, I founded the Millennial Action Project, the nation's largest organization of young elected legislators in the country. I'm the one candidate with federal legislative experience in this race, which is required to actually pass legislation. And I got to work with these legislators in Congress to pass bills ranging from gun violence prevention to clean energy funding. Now, when I announced our campaign, I said our number one piece of legislation is the following. And I was standing next to Barbara Lawton, our former lieutenant governor. People like Chris Marion endorsed our campaign. And I said, the root issue is the one at play when you see politicians profiting on the substance abuse crisis, on dehumanizing women, on kicking the can down the road on climate change. And that issue is getting big money out of politics and restoring integrity to our election system, ending the system of legalized bribery. That is my first piece of legislation in the Senate. I'm the candidate who's prioritized that and has the most comprehensive proposal, because members of Congress literally are not doing their jobs. I saw this firsthand walking through the halls of Congress. They're incentivized to spend most of their time across the street fundraising while lobbyists come in to pass legislation on to their staffs. That is a system I will end. Now, when we change the incentives, we'll get to produce much better legislation, and I'll work with you on a whole host of issues that are important to Southwestern Wisconsin. For example, taking on big ag and ensuring that small family farmers are at the decision-making table when the farm bill comes up. Providing federal funding for mental health providers in rural Wisconsin, ensuring we do have broadband and not only that, cell phone coverage in rural Wisconsin. I want to work with you on our boldest, the most bold climate proposal in this entire race, and that is a 100% clean electricity standard. Making sure that we're also stewarding our water systems in Southwestern Wisconsin. I want to work with you to build a wider consensus so we're actually protecting women's rights and we protect a woman's right to choose. I want to work with everyone here on making sure we stop these endless wars as well. So that's what's possible. And I recognize when you hear this new kind of politics, it may sound idealistic, but I can tell you this is the most practical way to make change. I've been directly involved in introducing 200 bills through Congress. 35 of those have passed. So we're talking about action here and not just symbolic calls for change. And the second thing is this style of politics is what wins, because we know in this election, we not only need to fire up the Democratic base, we need to activate the exhausted majority. And that's what our campaign is doing. I'll leave you with this. I believe the most important question you can ask before voting for any candidate is who's prepared to lose their job in order to do what's right. I believe there's a deficit of political courage in Congress right now. One of the most inspiring things I saw growing up was Russ Feingold casting the only vote against the Patriot Act. I'm prepared to lose my job in the US Senate in order to do what's right, because this campaign and this US Senate office is not about me. It's about you. It's about what we can build together. And that is a cause that I'm committed to. So if you believe, like I do, that we can create this new politics, that we can pass on a stronger democracy to our grandchildren, I ask everyone here not only to vote for our campaign, but to get involved, sign up for a phone bank, for a canvas shift, find other ways to spread the word about our campaign. I'm proud that after the only US Senate debate we had last week, the pundits declared us as the winner. So we're having our lightning in a bottle moment right now. We're surging and we're excited to shock the world on August 9th. Again, I'm Stephen Olikara. Ask for your vote and honored to be here and would love to answer any questions you have. Thank you so much. Oh, I think you're on mute, James. Sorry.
I'm consistent, if nothing else. I've done that about 10 times now.
Oh, good.
All right. But one of the questions that I oftentimes ask candidates is, you know, we learn a lot by being out there on the campaign trail, whether it be in southwestern Wisconsin or other parts of the state of Wisconsin. Are there any particular issues that have surprised you that people have brought up that might not be mainstream issues that we read about here in the press and in the media in general, but you're getting a feeling that there's a strong interest in?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think every region of Wisconsin we go to, you'll hear different issues come up. So for example, in southwestern Wisconsin, hearing a lot about the consolidation of the agriculture industry, about the lack of mental health providers. But I do think the underlying issue here that I pick up from a lot of people is the sense of we've lost trust in our politics. We've lost faith in its ability to deliver for us. And there was a study that found over 80% of Wisconsinites believe the federal government is fundamentally broken. And so that's why I'm the candidate running on changing the system. Because if you take women's rights, for example, just saying codify Roe v. Wade doesn't codify Roe v. Wade. As a candidate, you need to say, what are you going to do different than other members of the US Senate and what they're doing right now? Because only someone who does something different in terms of changing the system, changing the politics, bringing unlikely coalitions and diverse coalitions together, humanizing the issue to a wider audience, that's what's going to actually change. And so I've articulated how I'm going to be different in the US Senate. The other thing I'll point to on this is who, you know, a lot of people, whether I'm in southwestern Wisconsin and central Wisconsin, another thing that really comes up is like, we're so sick and tired of politicians who keep talking about this stuff and then they get there and then they change or nothing really changes. And that's why I'm really running on the idea of real change. I'll give you an example of what real change looks like. It's not only passing all these bills that I have done through Millennial Action Project, like the first gun violence prevention bill in over 2 decades. It's also announcing during this campaign that I will not vote for Chuck Schumer as the next Democratic leader unless he ends the legalized bribery in Congress, stop charging for committee assignments, and also ban the practice of lobbyists funding members of Congress. Who has the courage to do that? That's what real change looks like. So thank you.
You've obviously touched on a number of issues here that reach across the aisle potentially. One of the big challenges, of course, is even if you have a majority, a Democratic majority, keeping that majority together, but you do need people across the aisle, and you need people with Republican or independent voters in order to become the candidate who wins this primary and the candidate who unseats Ron Johnson. What do you think your biggest strength is to reach across to those voters who are not inclined to be Democrats?
This is not only such a great question, this is my calling in politics. This is why I first got involved over a decade ago. This was the premise of the organization I founded, Millennial Action Project, over 2,000 young elected leaders, Democrats, Republicans, and independents coming together to pass legislation. And we do this not only because it's the right thing to do, but it's what passes legislation. And so first, what are my strengths? Experience. Each of those 35 bills I was involved in passing through Congress, 100% of those had bipartisan support. That's frankly something that no other candidate in this US Senate race can say. And trust me, I mean that not only on the Democratic side. I've passed more legislation from the outside of Congress than Ron Johnson has passed through the inside of Congress, being there for 12 years. So that's really important. The second thing is listening and actually showing up. So for example, when we worked on our safe voting campaign here in Wisconsin, we reached out to a number of our Republican legislators and just had a very open mind and wanted to hear from them. And as a result, we found a number of them who are interested in supporting absentee voting and strengthening the system. So we built the only bipartisan coalition in the entire country supporting voting reforms during the pandemic. And I think the final thing is enjoying it. Like, I talked to a lot of candidates, including some of those who are running for this office right now. It's like they don't want, I mean, talking to someone across the aisle is like a chore. It's something they don't enjoy. It's like they hate doing it. I enjoy this. This is my passion. This is why I'm in politics. I love learning from people who are different than me. Bringing together these unlikely coalitions is something I've done because I enjoy it. It's a real passion of mine. And people, you know, whether I'm obviously a Democrat, but when I'm talking to an independent or a Republican, they can tell if you actually want to have the conversation, if you're genuine about listening. And that to me is probably the most important thing. Thanks.
Got a couple of really good questions in the chat right now. And I know you've touched on this a little bit, but getting into more specific details regarding campaign financing. What would you propose? How would you go about changing the way campaigns are financed?
Yes, great question. And by the way, one thing I forgot to mention on the last question, I hosted a series called Red and Blue Dialogues across the state, where we did exactly what we were talking about. So on campaign finance reform, I have the boldest plan on this. It's on our website. And at the root of it, it's based on a model that my organization was involved in passing in Connecticut. And what it says is when a candidate reaches a critical threshold of grassroots support, they get a competitive matching grant from the government to run a real campaign. And what that did was open up the doors of electoral politics to all kinds of non-traditional candidates, young people, minorities, women. It's been extremely successful. It also caps the amount that people can self-finance into their campaign, which is a huge loophole in our campaign finance system right now. And so it's been widely successful, and I want to scale that model up to the federal level. The other piece of this is banning members of Congress from fundraising while Congress is in session to address the root issue of members of Congress literally not doing their jobs. I wish more people could see what I saw, but basically it's people not being in the office, which I don't think passes anyone's common sense test. Imagine hiring someone to mow your lawn, but instead they're mowing someone else's lawn. So in this case, we are the employer. We've hired these politicians to mow our lawn, but instead they're mowing the donor's lawn, and that's wrong. And then the other big thing is banning lobbyists from funding members of Congress, which is legalized bribery. And this is a change that can be made through Senate rules, which is why I'll put the pressure on our own party's leadership to ensure that change happens. So those are some of the high points. And I'm the only candidate in this race calling for those reforms.
Let me ask you what I think is a related question. It was in the chat here. What's your feeling about term limits in Congress? And are there specific ideas that you think good, bad? And I think our current senator had a thought about 2 terms, but now that he's up for his 3rd, he's changed his mind. What's your thoughts?
I've been pushing this issue from the beginning of the campaign, including pointing to the fact that Ron Johnson had made a commitment. He would only serve 2 terms. And then what he said to break his pledge is a psychology that I've seen among many old and out of touch members of Congress, which is they start to think they're the only ones who can do this job. That's why they keep running again and again and break this pledge, while Congress becomes so stale and so calcified and so out of touch from our daily needs. That is why I'm proud to be the only candidate, Democrat or Republican, calling to enact term limits on members of Congress. I believe that's essential to rebuild the culture of a citizen legislature where ordinary people are supposed to go into government, create laws, and then leave into private life and live under those laws. That's something the founding fathers actually believed in. And I'm the only candidate calling for that. There's a bipartisan bill that I helped to introduce specifically on term limits. So this is what we need to replenish the leadership in office. I believe it's extremely anti-democratic to see these people clinging on to power. That's not something that should happen in the United States.
We have just a minute or so left, but I want to ask the one question. When you win the primary, or as you win the primary, and we all think positive, and you're in a televised debate with Ron Johnson, what would your closing statement be? It says here to discourage voters from voting for Ron Johnson, but I turn this around and say, how would you approach this to encourage, to make you the choice when people are watching that televised debate?
Yes, we're building an affirmative case here. I strongly believe it's not enough just to say you're against Ron Johnson. We're all against Ron Johnson. There's nothing new about that. What are you for? That's how you're going to build a movement that attracts the exhaustive majority to win. So this would be my closing statement. First of all, we need elected leaders who have the courage to do what's right and not just what's easy and convenient. Ron Johnson, for the last 12 years, has been doing what's easy and convenient over and over again to reward his donors and his special interests. And it's clear that he's not working for you. I'm running to take on the root issue in this campaign, in this country right now, and that is getting the big money out of politics and ending the system of legalized bribery. That's why I will be serving Wisconsinites, all of Wisconsinites, and not just the big money special interests. And that is what real change looks like. And I'm proud that I've passed more legislation than my opponent has. So I'm gonna prosecute this case directly to Ron Johnson. I won the last debate, and I look forward to winning the debate again against Ron Johnson this fall.
And if we want to know more about you than what we're just getting here tonight, how best do we contact you, or where is your information? What's our follow-up here?
Yes, well, first you can find us on social media at Stephen Olikara, on our website, stephenolikara.com. We need your help getting the word out. We're signing up volunteerships right now. And on top of that, we're raising support to keep our ads on the air and keep those out there. So those are the two big ways to engage. We want your ideas too. And we look for it. I've been, as many of you know, I've been to the Drift List many, many times during this campaign. The Drift List is really, I'd say, our unofficial headquarters of the campaign. And we look forward to coming back out very soon. I truly believe the future of our democracy really is going to be won in the Drift List. And that's not an exaggeration. And I would love to talk more about that sometime. But thank you all so much. And let's shock the world on August 9th.
All right.